My project is about rhetoric and law, more specifically the framing theory and Ethos Pathos logos within trials of prosecution and defense. So when we talk about rhetoric, we got to start at the beginning. Aristotle, this is him. He defines rhetoric as the faculty of observing in any given case of available means of persuasion. What that means is rhetoric isn't just fancy speech, it's a skill. It's about knowing how to persuade no matter the situation. And in the legal world, rhetoric isn't optional. It's the entire game. Trials aren't just about the facts, but they're about how those facts are presented, and the courtroom becomes a rhetorical battlefield. And this can be seen through the objections made, through the overruled decisions that the judge makes, or even closing arguments as lawyers use words, body language, tone, and credibility as their weapons, all while trying to balance emotion and logic within it. So when we say rhetoric matters in law, we really mean that the justice depends on how well someone can tell a story, making lawyers rhetorics. However, to understand the rhetoric within law, you got to understand how trials works. And these are the trial stages. We begin with the opening statement. And the opening statement itself is like a thesis. It sets the frame, introduces a theory of the case, and both sides get to go. Usually the prosecution goes first as they're part of the government, and the defense goes second. Basically laying out the facts of the case. Then we move on to direct and cross-examination. Then this is where credibility either gets built or destroyed. So direct questions are more open-ended, as you want the witness to try to tell the story, and cross is more leading. And basically throughout cross and directs, you lay out your cards, your evidence, your arguments, and your contradictions, and you just lay it all out. This is where it really matters what you do. So in direct, the witness is technically the star of the show. As I told you, you want to try to get all the facts out from the witness. And the attorney controls the witness during cross. So the questions are yes or no questions, quick and easy to the point, to try to catch them at the contradiction. And lastly is the closing argument. So this is where pathos and logos comes in. This is the emotional punch and the logical summary. The lawyer wraps up the case and he reframes it with all the facts in this case in chief and pushes it to jury towards the decision. So when you're watching trial unfold, you got to remember it's a step-to-step decision, and it's all a persuasive strategy, as trial itself is designed to shape how jurors interpret the facts. So, and also closing arguments is usually the more emotional. They tend to show the very controversial elements of the case, as that tends to be the more theatrical part. So now we're going to talk about how the framing theory itself works. So this part, it's all about how we see things. Erwin Goffman introduced the framing theory, which basically says we interpret events through mental frames. These frames shape our understanding and emotional reaction. So basically, you grab, in trial terms, you grab the facts of the case, and you see what facts align for you. And yes, his name is Erving Goffman, not David Goffman. My apologies, I was thinking about David Goffman for some reason. But Erving would state that people use frames to interpret the facts. And this goes to show within trial itself. So usually, prosecution tries to label the defendant as a monster, and if it's a case with facts, you try to make it so it has a negligence within it. However, the defense would try to humanize him and try to make those facts seem more of an accident. So each side tries to make the facts be perceived in a way that the light shines better on them, but they both have the same facts. So it's less about what happened and more about how it's told. Now we talk about ethos, pathos, logos, the holy trinity of legal persuasion. Ethos is a speaker of credibility. Does the jury trust the lawyer? Pathos is all about emotion. And logos is logic, the facts. And lawyers have to be able to balance all three of these. So a lawyer with amazing data but zero emotional appeal, not convincing. So as we go, we're going to talk about the three of them. So ethos is, as we stated, the credibility. So this usually comes through referrals or just reputation of being a good lawyer. If you're credible, you will be listened to. Then comes to the pathos. As we stated, Trial could be a little theatrical, so they tend to introduce facts that are more controversial but have a sway within the emotions. And then lastly is the logos itself, which is all the facts of the case. The facts, although different within every case, the facts make the case. And lastly, why is rhetoric a justice action? So after all this, you may be thinking, well, why does it matter? Well, because rhetoric isn't just a theory, it's how we do justice. In elections and everyday arguments, rhetoric helps shape decisions that in turn make us better citizens. Why? Well, this is because if we understand how persuasion works, we pick up the rhetoric book, understand it, we're not just better arguers, but we're better listeners. We can spot manipulation, we can defend our values more. And with this will help us as a tool in life as we go up through the stairs of life, giving us a bigger brain, better understanding of the world as, according to Rhetoric Society in America, rhetoric is essential to democratic life. It's the way we debate, decide, and move forward in society. So whether in graduation, when you're making money, or becoming an attorney. So yeah, a couple tips for law school that I've learned throughout my journey as I want to be a lawyer as well. Read more. Writing is great. It's a crucial skill, so try to perfect your writing. And take your time. Law school's not going anywhere. You got this. And this is the end. However, I'm going to play a closing argument that I crafted for a mock trial competition that I actually used during trial. And it will show you how not only do we perceive the defendant in a very negative light as we're the prosecution, but we also try to put the facts of the case in our favor. You'll realize that when we talk about Ryland Satterfield, which he's the not best friend, but he's the employer of this Legan Airball character you're going to hear throughout the speech. You'll see how we try to make him not credible. He's a liar. We paint him in the picture that's bad for the jury. So as you go, just keep in mind everything you just learned throughout the video and pay attention. Feel free to restart the video as well. And yeah, thank you. Your Honor, members of the jury, as we conclude today's trial, the prosecution has shown that the pieces of the puzzle, once lost, have been put back in their respective place by my co-counsel and I, unveiling the one truth. Ophir Surratt was murdered by Legan Airbach, ultimately putting an end to her American dream. Miss Ophir Surratt, the hardworking, brilliant immigrant who against all odds continued striving towards the pinnacle of her career, was sadly taken away early from her journey. Having to overcome language barriers, combat rigorous study hours, and even heavy workloads, just for her story to abruptly end at the hands of the defendant, turning her American dream into an American nightmare. Today is all about putting the horrible truth in the spotlight. You heard enough evidence here today to bring the defendants to justice for the murder of Ophir Surratt, whose dream was taken from them, just as their life was. As showcased today during trial, while Ms. Surratt worked overtime to keep the company from collapse, the defendant was busy finding alternative ways to save their company, regardless of any ethical standards. The defendant turned a blind eye on Ryland Satterfield's faulty algorithm, which he had falsely certified for $10,000. When Ryland showed the defendant the certificate, he immediately had his top investors invest in the broken algorithm. Despite what the defense may have said, the defendant knew that StockSnake was nothing more than made-up numbers. Yet he continued to market the StockSnake algorithm to his wealthy investors, accumulating over $40 million. Additionally, you've learned that the defendant's alibi makes no sense. Today in court, you heard from Ryland Satterfield and how the 2 World Series game tickets supposedly came from Al Winjo's clients. The same clients that were not attended to during the market crash. The same clients that were currently losing their money. And we're supposed to believe that these same clients gave away 2 World Series game tickets to a fraudulent analyst? The same analyst that, after realizing StockSnake was to be exposed for the fraud it truly was, ripped up the fraudulent certificate, a crucial piece of evidence, and threw it down the toilet? Hard to believe, isn't it, members of the jury? Of course, after Ms. Surratt was wrongfully blamed for the disappearance of $5 million from the Riverdale account,
she had enough of the two-faced company El Winjo Investments was. She decided to confront the defendant. However, such actions led to her intentional death by the hands of the defendant and her trusty knife. Now Ophir Surratt has nothing to long for, no dream to chase. Ms. Surratt's American dream, along with her, has not died in vain. In this trial, you heard from our witnesses, like Ms. Shay Tinto, Ophir Surratt's loyal friend and roommate, who knew the ins and outs of Ms. Surratt's daily life and the struggles she brought home from work, such as the unfair workloads and how she was held responsible for it all. You also heard from the lead detective of this case, Zine Gaffney. You learned how Gaffney aided in uncovering the real meaning behind the collected evidence and the true nightmares behind the doors of Al Winjo. This included the discovery of the murder weapon. You all saw the knife that was found by Detective Gaffney and his team in the defendant's office, with his fingerprints and Ophir Surratt's blood still on it. Gaffney also highlighted to the jury the discovery of a pool of blood beneath the carpet of the defendant's office, with the DNA collected from the crime scene also matching Ophir Surratt's. The blood on the knife, Ophir Surratt's. The gore underneath the defendant's office, also Ophir Surratt's, further linking her murder to the defendant. The defendant is being charged with third-degree murder. To convict the defendant, we must prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt, the highest burden in the land. Yet, my co-counsel and I embrace this burden, welcoming it with open arms, with the goal of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that Ligon Auerbach murdered Ophir Surratt, destroying her greatest dream. We have met this burden by proving the three necessary elements of third-degree murder. First, we prove that Ophir Surratt is dead, because we don't know where Ophir's body is. We needed to prove by the preponderance of the evidence that Ophir Surratt is dead. Thanks to Detective Gaffney, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you saw all the evidence that linked the defendant to Ophir Surratt's death, such as a knife that was used to kill Ophir Surratt, which contained traces of her blood still on that knife, matching Ophir Surratt's DNA by 99.9%. Additionally, that same DNA was found in the pool of blood in none other than the defendant's personal office. You heard from Gaffney, who confirmed that 3.5 pints of blood loss, the same amount recovered from the defendant's office, is a lethal amount. Next, my co-counsel and I had to establish beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant killed Ophir Surratt with that knife. Evidence today showed just that. Ligon Auerbach's fingerprints matched those of the knife in his personal office. That same knife contained Ophir's blood, further pointing towards the defendant's malice. Which brings me to my last element. The defendant killed Ophir Surratt after she attempted to confront Ligon about the string of disastrous events unfolding at Al Winjo. Ligon, in love with his company, refused to let it die, even if it meant keeping Ophir from reaching her American dream. Today, my co-counsel and I have proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant Ligon Auerbach knowingly and intentionally ended the life of Ophir Surratt due to the fear of her beloved company finally collapsing under all the hardships, which would have led to the company's closure. The only fix the defendant saw was third-degree murder, turning Ophir Surratt's lifelong dream into her worst nightmare in a single night. Members of the jury, as the harsh reality of this case sinks in, we call for justice for the life of Ophir Surratt. We urge that Ligon Auerbach be denied any further opportunity to pursue their dreams and aspirations, just as Ophir was denied hers. The real crime today would be giving Ligon Auerbach a second chance. This was not only a nightmare for Ophir Surratt, but for her friends, her family. So we urge you, members of the jury, to find the defendant guilty of third-degree murder, putting an end to this nightmare. Thank you.